Welcome back. All right, so redraft, going way, way, way back to 1984, 40 years ago. Let that sink in. All right, so redraft, of course, is simple. I've got on the board. I've done this a little different today. I like to change it up a little bit. So I've put on the board who they picked and how many games each player played in the NHL. Now, remarkable in this is the only two that didn't: Duncan McPherson of the New York Islanders at 20, and David Quinn at number 13 for the Minnesota North Stars. Just a little trivia answer there for you. David Quinn, the number 13 pick from Minnesota, did not reach the NHL. All right, so it started with Mario Lemieux, and I'm wearing Mario Lemieux because number one has to be Mario Lemieux. But what's interesting is this is where this draft gets crazy. This draft has a lot of star players in it, and so drafting at second, the New Jersey Devils have a chance to pick from some future Hall of Famers here. And you know, I kind of feel like it has to be Patrick Roy, who was originally drafted 51st in that draft. So yeah, that's a pretty good pick. I think that Patrick Roy moving from 51 to number two makes sense. Now, it's interesting because if the Devils had done this, everybody would have gone crazy. But later on, it would have been great. But keep this in mind: Marty Brodeur ends up being a New Jersey Devil. How crazy would it have been if they'd had both Roy and Brodeur? Yeah. So Patrick Roy goes to New Jersey, and I will now take this time to tell Montreal fans this is just a redraft. I'm not changing history. I can't do that. I'm not part of the Marvel universe. So at number three, the Chicago Blackhawks have some Hall of Famers to choose from as well, and yeah, so number three has to be Brett Hull, doesn't it? So Brett Hull, originally drafted 117th overall in that draft. Just crazy. Brett Hull, drafted by the Flames, briefly played for the Flames, and then gets traded to the St. Louis Blues in a deal that, yes, ended up helping Calgary win their Stanley Cup in 1989. However, could they have won more Stanley Cups with Brett Hull in their lineup past 1989? We'll never know. So Chicago drafts him at number three here. Eddie Olczyk's their original pick at number three. Eddie Olczyk ended up playing 1,031 games, just like Kirk Muller's no slouch either. 1,349 games played in the National Hockey League. So this is a pretty good draft. That Kirk Muller had a good career, and yet he's falling in the redraft version of it. Number four, another Hall of Famer going to Toronto. It's not Al Iafrate. Luc Robitaille. He was originally drafted 171st overall. I actually had a Luc Robitaille poster on my wall. And I had it on my wall because it showed where he was drafted, and I thought it was remarkable that he was drafted so late and he made it to the NHL and he was a success. Robitaille and Jimmy Carson came into the league right around the same time. I was a much bigger fan of Robitaille than I was of Carson. Just felt Robitaille was the better all-around player. And so, yeah, it turns out as time went on, yeah, Robitaille was the better all-around player. And no, I don't still have that poster. No, I don't drag stuff around with me like that. Why do you ask? But yeah, Robitaille goes at number four to Toronto instead of Al Iafrate. Wild thing. Who may show up in the top 21. I do have more than 21 on the list here, though. Next up, going number five to Montreal. And this is where it gets kind of tough because you have Kirk Muller. But there are others here as well, and I'm going to go in another direction at five. I'm going to have Gary Roberts move up from 12. So Gary Roberts was originally taken at 12. You know what? I'm just going to put a 1 next to Lemieux just because in case people can't read the smaller print on their phones. But Gary Roberts was originally taken 12th by the Flames. I'm going to have him taken number 5 by the Montreal Canadiens. If not for injury, Gary Roberts would have played more than that 1,224 games. In fact, the fact that he came back from injury at all was seen as remarkable and miraculous. I think he belongs in the Hall of Fame. I've made that argument in videos before. I don't care if it's as a player or as a builder because he has been so instrumental in helping players get their careers back on track. So, yeah, Gary Roberts to me is all around a Hall of Famer, great player. Peter Svoboda played 1,028 games, was drafted 5th by Montreal. He's dropping. So you've got Muller, Olczyk, Iafrate, Svoboda. Not bad. all dropping because you've got Roy, Hull, Robitaille, Gary Roberts. It's a stacked draft. All right. Next on the board, going to the LA Kings. Yeah. Kirk Muller drops from 2 to 6. I feel like the lowest that I can go with Muller is 6. Muller ended up playing 1,349 games in the NHL. He ended up being a team captain. He was a very good player and won himself a Stanley Cup in 1993 in Montreal. And honestly, he played a big role on that team too. So Kirk Muller, Patrick Waugh, 2 Stanley Cup winners, not drafted by Montreal in my redraft. So I don't know how I feel about that, but Muller only slips 4 spots in the redraft, not as far as he could have dropped. Which brings us to the next one on the list. At number 7, I'm going to go with... This is not easy. There's a lot, and I don't want to give up all the names on the list because then it just turns into, it makes the video even longer than it's already going to be. All right, at number 7, going to Detroit, Gary Suter. Gary Suter, a defenseman who had a nice long career. He was originally drafted 180th overall by the Flames and ended up being pretty darn good. So the Flames did well in this draft. 2 guys named Gary. Apparently it was just, I don't know. We got that Gary Roberts guy earlier. Is there another Gary? I don't know, Gary Suter. Sure, draft him. So at any rate, it was the year of the Garys for the Calgary Flames, and well, because Gary's right in the name. So maybe it was just a joke. Maybe somebody sat down and went, I don't know, we're Calgary. Do we want to get some Garys? Sure, we can get some Garys for Calgary, even though we don't say Calgary. Yeah, just idiots out in the West Coast say Calgary. So anyways, the Gary Suter draft, and see, I'm starting to say Calgary because I'm looking back to 1984 and I'm saying it how I said it as a kid. We all said it that way around here. I apologize. So no, it's Calgary. I know. But it just slips out. It's like the accent that people hide, when they're acting, and then they sit down to do an interview, and all of a sudden that accent comes out. I know there are not a lot of Newfoundlanders who've done their best to tamp down the Newfoundlander accent, but boy, when it comes out. All right, before I get sidetracked any further, let's move on to number 8. Now, there are some fascinating choices here at number 8. I'm going to put a little dot here next to Gary Suter so I don't accidentally draft him twice. But I'm going to go with moving up from number 17 to number 8, going to the Montreal Canadiens, Kevin Hatcher. If you hear a noise in the background, it's the washer. It's in the spin cycle. Normally, I pause videos or wait till it's done, but I need to get these recorded before we go on vacation, so I'm just going to let it ride. So Kevin Hatcher moves up from 17 to 8. Kevin Hatcher was a fantastically talented offensive defenseman. Defensively, he could be kind of scary at times, but the offense was fantastic. I seem to remember some 20 and 30 goal seasons in there. Now, whether my memory's tricking me or not, I don't know, but yeah, Hatcher was fantastic and played a good, solid number of seasons for Washington. Played for Dallas. Ended up playing a lot of games. He ended up with 1,157 games in his NHL career, so not too shabby, and he moves up from 17. All right, number 9 for Pittsburgh. Now, they already have Mario Lemieux again. So at number 9, you know what? Eddie ended up playing there anyways. I'm going to go with Eddie Olczyk. Starting out in Pittsburgh, he played 1,031 games in his career. He was originally drafted 3rd. So I'm going to go with Eddie Olczyk. Good goal scorer. Played really well wherever he was. I don't remember any issues with him when he was traded to or from a team where he complained about where he was going or, leaving one team or another. And he's had a nice, solid, long career as a broadcaster as well. So he stays in the top 10, goes to Pittsburgh in this 1984 redraft. All right, now Vancouver. For Vancouver, you know what? I'm going to give them Mario Lemieux. I totally could. Imagine if I did a redraft where no matter who's in the draft, Vancouver gets the best player. No matter where they're drafting, and look who slid in the draft. We forgot. Oh, look, Mario Lemieux ends up in Vancouver. Never going to happen. Anytime there's a franchise player in a draft, Vancouver's nowhere near first. It's one of those things. It's just a rule. All right. So number 10. There are some fascinating choices here. You know what? He ends up here anyways, and I can make a good argument for Kirk McLean being drafted by Vancouver at 10th He was originally drafted 107th overall by the Devils. Good find by the Devils, too. Kirk McLean had a remarkable career in Vancouver. And if he'd been drafted by Vancouver, it might have been a longer career in Vancouver. And who knows, they might have been better sooner. Goaltending was an issue for Vancouver throughout a lot of the 80s. And again, if McLean had been in the system quicker for Vancouver, who knows? But I can definitely argue him ahead of some of the other guys on this list. We can have that debate though in the comments, right? A respectable debate. All right, number 11, and moving up from number 27, which now would be a first round draft pick, wasn't back then. So moving up from 27th overall to the Hartford Whalers goes Scott Mellanby. Scott Mellanby had a nice long career. Of course, he was part of that very blue collar crew in Florida that went to a Stanley Cup final in 1996. And yeah, Mellanby, he was around for quite some time. And he's a guy that I really like as a higher up in NHL teams too, assistant GM. I think he's going to be a general manager at some point. He always seemed to be one of the smarter players in the game, and that's part of how you end up having a nice long career as he did. So yeah, Scott Mellanby, number 11. Number 12. And it does get tough because trying to grade out, okay, where would I put this guy? And if I'm drafting, where would I put this guy? All right, so number 12. Moving up from number 59. Where he was drafted by the Washington Capitals, where he played his whole career, I do believe. I don't think he ever got moved. But moving up from 59, Michael Pivonka. So Michael Pivonka moves up to 12 to the Calgary Flames, and I think he would have had a solid career playing for the Calgary Flames. Now, instead of Gary Roberts, is that a downgrade? Yeah, Gary Roberts, again, one that I think belongs in the Hall of Fame, but Pivonka not bad in terms of a consolation prize for losing Gary Roberts. And again, shows this is a really good draft. Like, I was surprised when I looked this one up that I hadn't done this one before, and I think it was because I didn't see a lot of star power in that first round, but when I go ahead and I organize it by points, I'm like, you know what? Yeah, this is a really, really good draft. So Michael Pivonka is at 12th in it. Number 13. I'm thinking about picking one of my favorites, but I don't know that I can necessarily justify it right now. But number 13... Yeah, sure. Dropping from 5th, and again, as I said, having played 1,028 games in the NHL, it's Peter Svoboda going to the Minnesota North Stars. Svoboda, good defenseman, good all-around player, and a key guy on the Montreal Blue Line for a long time. So he would have fit in just perfectly fine in Minnesota. I would have enjoyed him playing for Minnesota. It didn't happen. But yeah, so Svoboda goes there. Where do I have Svoboda on the list? Right there. All right, moving on to number 14. So at 14th, moving up from 29th. So originally, New York Rangers drafted Terry Karkner. Karkner, good NHL player, played 858 games. I'm having them draft Stefan Richer. Richer did score 50 goals in a season. He was a very good goal scorer. He had injury issues too that shortened his career a bit. So yeah, I'm going to have Richer at 14. This is where the question comes in with, so longer career versus bigger star. And so Richer would have been a bigger star than, say, Mellanby, but for me, Mellanby's body of work over his entire career I would put ahead of Richer. So I know there's people who quibble with that, and so yeah, I'm going with Richer at 14. At 15, so with Richer, put a little dot next to Richer so you don't get messed up here. You're an old man, Shannon. At 15 to the Quebec Nordiques. Moving up from 134th in the draft. Cliff Ronning. Originally, they drafted Trevor Steinberg. Steinberg played 71 games in the National Hockey League. So, yeah, I think Cliff Ronning's a bit of an upgrade there. So Ronning is an example of how, he had a longer career, I would say, than Richer, but the overall success, I would go with Richer over Ronning. But again, It's all just a matter of opinion. You guys can let me know your thoughts. But Ronning going 15th overall to Quebec. Again, this is just an absolutely stacked draft. So, dot next to Ronning. Done. And number 16, originally Pittsburgh drafts Roger Belanger, who played 44 games in the National Hockey League. Going to go out on a limb and say I'm not drafting him at this spot. I don't have him down on my paper. So now we're getting into like, okay, so this guy was similar to this one, and this guy was similar to this guy. So, and then there was this career was longer than that one. I'm going with Don Sweeney. A defensive defenseman, yes. Originally drafted 166th overall by the Bruins. But an excellent, just stay-at-home defenseman who played forever for Boston. He was reliable. Just very, very, very good player that I enjoyed watching in Boston. I haven't been taken by Pittsburgh, which I'm definitely conflicted about because, you know, if Sweeney had been playing for the Penguins back then, anyways. But yeah, I'm having Sweeney. So for Pittsburgh, this is a good draft. They get Mario Lemieux, Eddie Olczyk, and Don Sweeney in the first round. And done. You get yourself two really good forwards, one that's a franchise forward, a generational forward, and you get yourself a really good top four defensive defenseman in Don Sweeney. Which brings us to, at number 17, dropping from number 8. He played 1,156 games in the NHL, and that's Shane Corson. So for Shane Corson, he drops from 8th to 17th and goes to Washington instead of Montreal. Corson, good player, sandpaper guy, not a popular player with every fan, but he was a heart and soul guy that played the kind of hockey that you want to see in the playoffs. But yeah, I have Corson going at 17 to Washington. He could also put the puck in the net too, which is why he's in the first round. Number 18. So with Corson checked off, number 18. You know what? Instead of Michael Anderson, who played 761 games in the NHL, he had a really good career, or Mikhail Anderson. Some of them say Michael, some say Mikhail. And I'll go with Michael Anderson. I think when he was in, anyway, that doesn't matter. Number 18, dropping from number 4, L.I. Frady. One of the most colorful personalities in National Hockey League history. And he was endlessly entertaining. I was sad that he didn't spend more time in Boston than he did. He was a Bruin for entirely too short a period of time. Because I thought he fit. I thought when he wore the Bruins jersey, I was like, and he's home, and then he ended up in Washington. I was like, no, I want him to be in Boston. But at any rate, I Frady, number 4. He played 799 games in his career. His career was shortened by injury. Otherwise, we'd be looking at well over 1,000 games. And he was the wild thing. He was one of a kind. So I Frady ends up going in the first round of this draft at number 18. Number 19. And again, we're getting into players who are similar to one another. But I'm going to go with going to Boston. Moving up from number 60 overall. Ray Sheppard. And I remember having debates with people about Ray Sheppard when he was playing regarding his goal-scoring ability. He could score goals. His skating speed was not the greatest. So he was one of those players that he would score the goals. He knew exactly where to stand, but sometimes his plus-minus could get kind of ugly, and sometimes his foot speed wasn't the greatest. But every time that he had a resurgence somewhere, I was happy for him. And so I think I've done a Ray Sheppard career video. In fact, I think a lot of the names on this board I've done career videos for. During this week, I've been looking at players who I haven't done career videos on, and there aren't that many. I'm like, oh, I could do, nope, 3 years ago. I can do, nope, 4 years ago. So odds are if you search my channel, if you're looking for a player, you're probably going to find a video on them. And I think Ray Sheppard is one that I've done a career video on. I think so. If I haven't, I need to, because his career was very interesting. So Ray Sheppard, I already checked that off. No, well, dot next to it. All right, so we're on to number 20. So we're down to just 2 left, and I've got, I think, 5 names left on here. Moving up from number 36 to go to the New York Islanders, Jeff Brown. Jeff Brown was a very talented offensive defenseman who defensively could get kind of scary at times as well. I remember when the Canucks got him in '94, and he was a big part of the reason they went all the way to the Stanley Cup final. There were always all the rumors about Jeff Brown and why he left. Those rumors have been debunked, but they're still out there. Brown bounced around the league a bit, and I could never understand exactly what it was that caused him to bounce around, because all he did was produce. There was a ton of points. So based on his production alone, he kind of has to be in the first round of this draft, moving up from 36 to 20 for the New York Islanders. But again, Jeff Brown, good solid career, and kind of a steal when they picked him up from the Blues. All right, so last one in this first round. So I'll give you guys the names I have now. I have Doug Bodger, I have Paul Ranheim, I have Jeff Brown, I just did, Sylvain Cote, and Sean Burr. So Sylvain Cote played 1,171 games in the NHL. Good defensive defenseman. Sean Burr, 878 games in the NHL. Good solid top nine forward. Paul Ranheim was a basically second/third liner through most of his career. And then Doug Bodger, who was a number 9 pick, played 1,071 games in his career, and he was a good defenseman. I'm going to give the edge to Bodger. I'm going to have Doug Bodger go to the Oilers, who originally drafted Selmar Odeline, who played 18 games in the NHL. Oh, and just for purposes, again, for people who can't see it on their phones, Dave Passon was drafted by Boston at 19 originally, played 76 games, and as I mentioned, Duncan McPherson didn't play a game. So Doug Bodger drops from 9 to 21 and ends up going to the Edmonton Oilers, which I think he would have been okay with. I think going to a team that's in the midst of becoming a dynasty, I think he'd be happy with that. And Bodger could have had himself a couple of cup rings if he'd played for the Oilers in the 80s. So there you go. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. As always, don't forget to hit like and subscribe in the event that you haven't hit those buttons already. Number 1 is easy, and number 2 and 3 and 4 are kind of easy on this draft. And after that, I think it's open to interpretation. But maybe you think Hull should have gone second. Let me know your thoughts. Thank you guys so much for all your support. I will talk to you again soon.